mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on new program research from the outside looking in. My name is Nicole Forschler-Horn, and I'm president of JMH Consulting. I'm also joined today by Linda Holt, the executive director of Excelsior College, and I will let Linda introduce herself in a little more detail in a second. Today we'll be taking a look at the process that you can go through as you examine and consider new programs to launch. A few housekeeping things before we get started. First of all, we are recording this webinar, so if for any reason you need to jump off, I'll be sending the recorded webinar by the end of the week via the email address you provided. If you have questions, you can, there is on the screen where you log in, a place where you can enter questions. I believe it's under chat, so just let us know if you have questions. We will be stopping at the end and making time for questions. If for any reason we don't get a chance to answer your question during the webinar, either Linda or myself will reach out and talk with you one-on-one. So on that note, let's begin. Linda, I'll let you start by introducing yourself.
Thank you, Nicole. As Nicole said, my name is Linda Holt. I'm the Executive Director for Administrative Operations in Extended Education at Excelsior College. For those of you who are not familiar with Excelsior, we're one of the oldest distance education providers in the nation, with more than 40 years old. We are Middle States accredited, and we're not-for-profit. We have about 150,000 graduates, and our current enrollment is about 37,000 students. In extended education, we're a group of educators with a lot of online expertise, with a lot of experience at institutions across the country, and we have a shared culture as a nonprofit institution. And our work here is that we help other institutions determine institutional readiness for going online and sharing our experiences.
Well, great. And a little bit about JMH. For those of you who don't know, JMH Consulting is a consulting firm that works exclusively in higher education and almost exclusively with programs and departments that serve adult non-traditional students. We do a couple of things. We partner with universities to launch non-credit certificate programs, and what's unique about JMH is after we help you launch and manage that program, we actually transition the certificate program to the university so that you own it at the end of the contract. And we serve as a marketing and recruitment partner for universities across the country. So let's get into the topic of the webinar. Today what we're going to be talking about is essentially creating a program strategy, a strategy for doing the market research, looking externally at resources and demand in and around your university, as well as trying to align that with the brand of your university. And we'll end that by creating a program launch plan. So where we'll begin is at the beginning, and that is knowing where you want to end up. And why I start here is your goal needs to be, what do you want your department to be? How do you want the department to grow? We've worked with several universities across the country, and those goals are not always, of course, revenue is pretty consistently a driver, but not always. Sometimes the goal of the department is to be a bigger, more robust part of the community. Sometimes it's to be a more active participant within the university, where they're providing some central administrative supports for the university, or helping different colleges within a university launch different programs. And sometimes it's just to grow that CE unit or school. Regardless of what you choose, you need to be clear on what your final destination is. The next thing you want to look at is what your market wants. And doing market research can be overwhelming. There's lots of talk of different trends and growing and shrinking markets. You might remember 7 years ago, everyone was talking about the green revolution and all of the demand for green jobs. Some universities were able to build and meet that demand, but not many. The ones that did, like the University of Vermont, both had a brand and a market for it. So I like to say, always begin with looking at what your home market needs. Know what your city is best known for or what your home state is best known for. Whenever you look at new programs, you're going to get the biggest bang from something that meets the needs of your surrounding community. And again, that could be from a personal enrichment perspective, but certainly and most truly from a professional development perspective. So when you're looking at what your home needs, what you want to look at are the resources that are in your backyard, things like your Chamber of Commerce, your civic association, and economic development centers. These are all fantastic resources, and a lot of them post white papers and research on what's happening in the greater metropolitan area and where they see the trends and the jobs going. At a minimum, you can check out what they're publishing. But you can also be more aggressive and take those people out for lunch, invite them to come and talk with you. Developing a relationship with your Chamber of Commerce and with your economic development centers also opens up the door, if you're doing professional development programs, to start a relationship where you can say, okay, well, you're saying this is needed, you're saying that these companies want it, we can then build it, can you help make the introductions to those companies so we can make sure we're meeting that demand. But again, look at what's in your backyard, because as a university and college, you are the trusted brand. From there, we're going to take a look at moving from a local level to a state and a federal level. Both for the state and federal level, there is fantastic information on occupation trends and industry trends. I love what you're looking at. This is a map from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that you can get off the Department of Labor website. And this is showing the employment of paralegals by state. But the fantastic thing is, as you peel back the layers of this, you can get to, through their website, the regional and metropolitan areas and how those regional and metropolitan areas are performing. Paralegal's a great example because you can see, looking at this map, that South Carolina, as an example, wouldn't necessarily be considered a hotbed for paralegals, but when you peel back and look a little deeper into the city and metropolitan areas, Columbia, South Carolina is one of the top 10 areas for paralegals when you get out of the major metropolitan markets, outside of DC, New York, LA, and Chicago. And being able to find that data and launch a paralegal program, and I know that this is what the University of South Carolina used as they were considering whether there was enough space in the market to launch their own paralegal certificate, which has now become a big part of the programs that they offer, and successfully so. But without that market research, I know there's going to be people on our call who say, "Oh, we have a paralegal program too," and they're not always that successful. The data will tell you what will happen. Of course, and I think this is a big part of JMH as a marketing partner. We use Google all the time. Google is your friend. And where you can use Google and really leverage the data is Google Insights. Google Insights will share with you, you could do a search on different terms, and it will share with you the interest over time in a given term. Now keep in mind, these are not long tail terms. You can't get down to a high level of specificity. Like paralegal certificate is probably in Google world more of a tail term than a head and body term. But it will tell you what if people are looking on paralegal. And I always like to compare terms. I always like to take a successful program of, I want the search volume to be around the level of this successful program when you're putting in search terms. You can see here I used the search terms paralegal, graphic designer, and financial planner. And not surprisingly, For those of you in non-credit continuing education, we've seen graphic design starting to make a slight steady rise, and certified financial planner a little bit more of a decline. Paralegal was huge in 2005 and has really dropped off a little bit, and is beginning, I'm hoping, is beginning to reach more of a leveling off. But use Google Insights, because it can provide for you a sense for whether or not people are looking for your search terms. And it will provide this is also Google Insights, what we're looking for here, data on different regions and how different regions are performing when you're looking at search terms, which is, again, fantastic. This is also really useful if you know that your university brand carries weight outside of your immediate geographic area. So if you know, for example, if you're located in Atlanta, but you're a university that actually serves a lot of people from New York. I'm thinking of one university in particular where I went to as an undergrad, where there were lots of Atlanta people, but there were also a lot of people from New York and New Jersey. You can market up there an online program, and this helps you to better pinpoint that. Finally, it's always useful to look at who's hiring in your community. Take a look at the newspapers. Talk with your employers. Find out what's happening in the community, because the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that's going to have fantastic information. But again, looking at your home and in and around where you're at, creating those relationships with the larger employers to really get a sense for, this is what's happening in our community, this is the demand that we have. If you're lucky enough to be in a larger city where you've got a booming industry and there's demand across several companies, you can, again, create programs that really serve those companies, because adult students in particular, when they're going back to school, they're not going back for the enjoyment of education most of the time. Usually they're going back to further their own education or make a job transition. So that's where we're at now, is looking at where do you want to go and your research. I don't like to leave, of course, that research section without at least touching on the competition and taking a look at your competitors and your benchmark schools. I have competition in there. I think that should be obvious for people. You want to look at what your competitors are launching. You'll have a sense for what's working and what's failing. With the what's working, there's frequently enough space in a market, depending on the program, that you can also enter the market and compete, that there's enough room for two schools. There certainly is if you can take a program and, based on your research and your conversations with the chambers and with companies, whether you know how to differentiate that program so that it better meets the needs of your community. What's failing also saves you the trouble of launching a program that, well, the school just up the road tried that and it wasn't going well, and knowing why it wasn't going well and if it's worth you also taking a crack at. This is also a chance for you to get a better sense of pricing and how you can price, and all of this is taking a look at what you can do that they're doing and how you can do it better. And this is really when we're getting into priority considerations, when you're looking at all of the research and all of your competitors, is you're trying to get a sense of, is there a demand for a certain program? Are you going to be able to reach the students you need? Because there could be a demand for a program or a new program or a new topic. I give emergency management. There's a master's degree in emergency management. That's an emerging field. You still have to inform students that they need it, unlike an MBA where people know immediately what that is and what that means. You have to get a sense of, is there demand, and can you tell people about it? Looking at your competitors, getting a sense if your students can afford the degree, and thinking about that as you think about whether to move forward. These are all the outside considerations. And I don't want to move off the can you afford the degree too fast, because what we've found is I like to use the nursing assistant as a great example. There's a high demand for nursing assistants. There's a lot of room in the market for people to get hired for that program. I think the challenge is that a nursing assistant only makes in the mid-20s, and so they might pay $500 for a certificate program, but they're certainly not going to pay $5,000 for the certificate program. So knowing not only the demand, but what those industry occupations, more specifically, those occupations pay, where there's alignment for your program, will help you to set pricing and will help you to determine whether you should continue to explore that. That's all looking externally, and I had Linda join us so we could talk a little bit more about internally, because that is going to make an impact just as much on the outside of what your brand and what you can market. So Linda, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Nicole. So when you're looking at programs that are potentials for you, an important thing is to look at your brand and what is your institution known for? What do you see as the strengths of your institution? Are you well known in your market for something particularly like accounting or business or data informatics? Does your faculty have a fit somewhere in the market that can be used to build a new program, or do you have strong corporate development, workplace ties that can be helped to find new partnerships? We have one locally that was doing a lot of wind power work at one point because of really strong corporate ties that they had, and they were able to build a program in conjunction with GE locally to build a really strong continuing ed piece there. So they were able to build something really strong that they were able to sell to the major market, but it was in conjunction with a company that they had through corporate development. Also, are there any local trade associations that you can use to build ties that can lead to new programs? Are there things happening in your state or local area, that legislation that could potentially impact? I'm thinking back of Sarbanes-Oxley when it happened in the early 2000s. That led to a lot of continuing education building in the accounting area, but you wouldn't necessarily have known about it if you weren't a part of those associations. So it's important for you to talk with your faculty who get out there and actually do a lot of work or work with local associations or their state associations to find out what's happening in the market that could build a program for you or help build a program for you. Nicole asked me to touch on priorities, and what I would look at first is what are you known for in the market, and then build from there. If your business school is really well known, I would talk to the business school first and find out what's going on. What do they think is happening? Then talk with your corporate development people, and last I would rely on your faculty, simply because faculty have great ideas sometimes, but they don't always have a lot of purpose in the market, and so it's sometimes difficult to build those and sell those at scale. Where your corporate development people can be a little bit more tied into what's happening in the market. So next is, where do you see your program fitting in the mix of competitors? Are you able to make that go, and are you able to have something that's different from what everybody else has? Nicole touched on this just a few minutes ago with your competitors. See what they're doing and figure out, is there some kind of play that we can have on here that's going to be a little bit different, a little bit more unique, and that can sell in our market? Can you build upon what they're doing to further your own goals? Brand strategy. Does your existing brand architecture align with or accurately reflect the institution's marketing and reputation goals? Is your new program that you're thinking about building going to fit within that brand well, or is it kind of outside the box? It's a really important question. You can build something that's outside the box, and sometimes they work really well, but it's better if it fits well within your brand and what you're really well known for. Next piece we're going to look at is, by looking at the types of students who have chosen your institution in the past, we can look at the market as a whole and extrapolate where your potential students may be for the new proposed programs in terms of demographic, psychographic, and geographical. So you want to look at, who are your raving fans? Who loves your institution? Who came to you for an associate's degree? Who came to you for an undergrad degree? Who came to you for a master's degree and then continues on into continuing education, or post-bachelor's degree for a degree, or for continuing ed, I'm sorry. At a minimum, there's things that you should be able to find just by talking to alumni, your alumni affairs people, and some current student focus groups. You can learn a lot about who your students are and why they come to you. There's certain markers that people pull out that are really important for them at each institution, and those are things that you really need to ask questions about and find out why. You can then turn that information into action by building programs that appeal to this certain type of person. And I'll give you an example. Next slide, Nicole. Okay, this is Family Man Fred. We put a lot of information through a database called TargetX, and it then brings out, what we do is we send in information about our institution, and it sends us back information about personas. Personas are information about who people are that choose your institution or choose to buy certain types of goods. And a persona will then give us a lot of information about a particular type of person who's chosen us in the past and who potentially would choose us in the future. Fred is African American. People in this demographic are likely to be African American or Asian. He's upper middle class. He's in the age group that would have a bachelor's degree necessarily and be looking for further education. Household income is fairly healthy at 75 to 100,000, and he's got a home. He's got a home value, so he's invested in this community. Heavily advertising. He's swayed by the opinions of others. He's an influencer for family and friends, and image is really important to him. There's other pieces that are really important about Fred that you need to know. He's expecting to buy a new home within the next 12 months. He may have changed jobs recently to something different with the same pay grade, or he's expecting to make that change very soon. He's also a very heavy credit card user, and he's investing in securities in his 401k. So looking at Fred, what kinds of programs would you think would be important to him that you could build to sell to him? And you wouldn't want to necessarily charge too much because he's got a lot of debt, but you might want to look at Investing 101, home buying, debt reduction. And the next piece is, how would you best reach this person? How would you meet Fred? So he's a really heavy internet user, but he doesn't read outdoor advertising. So if you're trying to reach him with billboards, that may not be the best way. Television is probably going to be too expensive, but radio might be something to think about if you can find the right station. So there's a lot of information you can just get from talking to your current students and trying to figure out who they are as people and where they go online. What types of websites do they visit, and what types of behaviors do they have in their life? What could potentially be happening in their personal life that you can then use to build further programs? Okay, Nicole.
Well, what all of this is doing for you in terms of looking at your competitors, looking at your benchmark schools, what they're offering, looking at the market research, in looking at the strengths of your university, is it's going to generate ideas. You're going to, when we go through this process with other universities and we come up with a list of programs, that list can be easily 50 new programs long. And some of them are going to align with your brand, and that's what you need to begin to look at a little bit more closely. Some of them are going to align with the market, and what you're looking for is getting those ideas out there, having them prompted by looking at your brand and looking at the external research. But again, ideas are generated. Your next step is to begin to hone in on and more thoughtfully select what programs make sense for you. And that's when you get into the good market research. So, Linda, you were about to jump in, and I'll go ahead and let you.
That's okay. Back on the slide before, I would suggest people go through a basic SWOT analysis. When you have like your top 10, then try to get some ideas around that. What's really going to work in this market and what's really not? And that can help you make the differentiating factor between choice A or choice B. Thanks, Nicole.
That's a great point. And I think moving into that SWOT analysis, when you're looking at that, you can take into account, will this program make sense given the typical obstacles that you run into? So too few differentiators. You can have, I'm going to use Six Sigma as an example. You could say that there is huge demand for a Six Sigma program, given, let's say you have a lot of manufacturing as a strong and growing industry in and around your university. There may be some alignment with your university brand. But there's a lot of competition for Six Sigma. There's one university in particular that they are trying to own that market, and they are going to make your marketing pretty expensive, and they are a low price leader. So having a sense for the way in which you are going to differentiate to help that program stand out. Recognizing, as I just said, that there are going to be low price leaders out there. If you are just competing on price exclusively, you're not going to win. Your university, what you bring to market is not the low price leader. We're not Walmart. We are universities. So talk about the education and the impact that this is going to have on somebody's life. This is where, again, you get back to that research of being able to say what we know about the market, what we know about this industry and occupation is included in this program, and we'll prepare you for it. There's also, as you take a look at your list of programs and your possible new launches, you have to recognize that not only are there outside competitors, there can be internal competition. We work with a fantastic university that has a pretty strong non-credit department, and they are willing to go head-to-head with other departments on campus. If you've got the bench strength to do that, and you've got a university culture where that's acceptable, go for it. But I know of other universities that walk very timidly around business topics because their B school will not allow for that kind of internal competition. But you need to take a look at your internal competition as well as your external competition, because those are factors that could be obstacles that might be deal breakers. And as you move from that list of potential opportunities and ideas down to this is what we should move on, recognizing the weight of those obstacles is going to be a critical next step. So that brings us to creating a program launch plan. So you've done the research, you've looked at your brand, you've got a sense for the options, and you've also looked at the obstacles. Now you're going to get into all right, instead of having a top 10 list, maybe you have a top 5 list. And this is when you get more into the minutia of what can you do and how can you do it in a timely manner. What we know working in higher education is that launching new programs is tough. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it all the time. But it's tough and it's time-consuming. There's a financial cost to doing so, and there's also an opportunity cost. A choice to focus on one program means that you're taking time away from existing programs or launching another program. So creating a launch plan that further helps you identify what steps you need to take, what resources you have at hand, what's going to be difficult and what's going to be easy is a great next step. And that starts with the financials. Is this financially viable? Are there low-cost providers so that you have to keep your pricing down? Does curriculum already exist that you could partner with somebody and get it up faster? How expensive is the courseware either to purchase or to build? And how much will people pay for this program? That's why some programs, to me, they might be more difficult to create, but if you can charge for a non-credit program, as an example, $10,000 for a certificate versus $3,000, the time and investment is worth it because you'll recoup that, and that money will return to you over the long term. And then program staff and resources. This is where you need to take a hard look at whether your staff has the time to build whatever it is, whether marketing has the capability. Do you have people who can make the recruitment calls? Do they have the bandwidth to take on one more program? And that might mean sunsetting a program so that you make the space to do that. And that's something that I think people, that sometimes our university leaders are afraid to do. They're afraid to let go of that program that's been limping along. But there's value in saying we're going to allocate resources and time to something new. And then, unless of course you're online, there's classroom availability will also be a challenge. Linda, is there anything you want to add on this?
Yeah, even if classroom availability online is not necessarily the same problem, but there's also costs there to get a program up and running. So there's things that you have to think about there too, as far as course development and other pieces that you have to be aware of. It's not free just because you're online.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, talking with the students. And Linda, I'll let you talk to this a little bit more.
Yeah, quite a lot of what we've been doing in our work is working on student relationship marketing models. And so this is really how do you journey a student from being a prospect into becoming one of your students and the whole process behind that. This becomes more complicated in online because you have students who are all over the country, so time differences of course, but then also your competition is there as well. So you have to make sure that you're differentiated within your market. So what I suggest people do is build a student journey map and exhibit how the architecture works for your web experience. This can take some time and it is a lot of work, but learning how students get from point A to point B to become your student can help you map out what happens at each piece of the pie. So if a student sends in a lead form, what happens? Once you follow up with that lead form, what happens? Going from each of those pieces can help you build out communication plans so that you stay in great touch with your students, find out what's happening, and increase your conversions greatly. You need to know how they navigate the process, what happens next, and make sure that you mitigate losses at each of those areas. Nicole, I'm sure you agree on that as well.
Yes. I feel like this is such a big piece, and it's something that I talk with universities where they don't have a system in which the prospective student raises their hand and says, I'm interested, and there's not a plan for how you're going to move that student from I'm interested to I'm engaged to I've selected this program as a good program for my needs to enrollment. And when we engage with universities, it's building a combination of frequency of phone calls, timing of phone calls, combining phone calls with emails, and not just one-off emails, robust communication plans of if this is the question, then this is the answer. If they are at this point in their career or in their school experience, these are the series of emails you're going to send. Be thoughtful about how you can engage, because I promise you, if you are not thoughtful about them, the for-profit universities will be, and there's a lot of competition out there. So we're just not in a place anymore where you can take your prospective students for granted. It's not as simple as if we build it, they will come. Unfortunately, it'd be so much easier if it was.
Absolutely. It's all about building a relationship and finding the ways to do that in a new market. Yep. Next slide. This is something that we've worked on really hard here at Excelsior. We have a continuing ed unit called the Center for Professional Development, and for the most part we've been partnering with a vendor, and there are reasons why we were doing that. We were trying to get quick to market, get the pieces up and running, and working really hard to sell programs, and that's gone really well. But we're learning that there's options, and having worked through that with that department, I thought I would talk a little bit about that. You have some options, and depending on your timeline and budget and interest, there's different things that you can do, or even a combination thereof. You can get going fairly quickly by partnering, but you lose some autonomy because you potentially are doing a revenue share, or you might be giving up your course development in order for someone else to sell your project, or someone to take or sell you content and you then give them a piece of the pie. You can buy curriculum, This can be a really quick way to get going, but it can be expensive, and you could potentially lose autonomy because you're not in control of that curriculum development piece. If you've got something that's really unique, this may not work for you as well. You may not be able to get specific curriculum that works for you. And you can develop in-house. This is where we're turning to more now, is developing in-house and then partnering with a vendor in order to help us sell it. So we're doing a hybrid model. But by developing in-house, we're helping to manage our expenses because we hire the instructional designers to build the courses, and we can also then control the quality therein. But it takes time, and we're finding that it takes a lot of resources. And so fortunately, we have a structure that allows us to spend a little money here, but it certainly is not inexpensive, depending on who we're using. Internal, we're spending about $5,000 to $10,000 to build a program, depending on how big it is. If we use external sources, it's anywhere up to $60,000 to build a program. Depending on how big it is as well, and up from there. So you've got different models, but it's really going to depend on what your budget is and how much time and resources you have to put into the projects.
And that takes us to our final slide, where you're really prioritizing and moving through the what are your opportunities, who's your audience, is this financially viable, and do you have the staff and the curriculum to get it launched. So that's how we go through that. And again, you'll have a better sense of internally what you want to prioritize, but these are all things you should be looking at as you look at the opportunities that are out there. So now I'm going to move to questions, and I did get one question that came through was, can you describe how you would recommend quantifying demand, and what metrics have you used to make decisions on the demand for a program? And I'll take a crack at that first, and Linda, if you want to chime in, you certainly can.
Sure.
I really use the process that I have shared with you is pretty similar to a process that we take as we're looking at whether or not to launch a non-credit certificate program with a university partner. We go through this process with them and keep our fingers crossed that the certificate programs we offer will bubble up to the top, which does not always happen. And I use I first begin with looking at what are the industries, and for that I don't have specific measurements. For that, you can get out of your economic development center. They're going to say these are the industries that are growing and these are the occupations that are growing. When I dig a little deeper, and really I am trying to take a hard look at what are the occupations that are growing and by how much are they growing, because you can look at realistic numbers. You can go through, you can rank for your metropolitan area the largest number of occupations, and it will show you also by how much they're going to grow and how much they have grown. So you can have occupations where there's a lot of people working in that occupation, but there's not growth. Andrew, unfortunately, you're getting a sense, and I'm trying to communicate, there's not a simple answer to this, but I like to use occupations as kind of my indicator and try and align programs with occupations where there's not only a large number of people in that occupation within a metropolitan area, but that number is also growing. And both of those data points you can get out of the Department of Labor's statistics website, and that's my first go-to place. And then I also like to use Google Insights and do a search on whether people are and run the query as to whether people are searching for the major terms associated with a given program. And what I like to do is I like to use either a successful program to compare it to, because you want those numbers to be fairly close, or just there are programs that we do that aren't gangbuster successful, but that are consistent. They consistently fill, they consistently generate revenue. They wouldn't be considered a cash cow by any means, but they're like the little engine that could. They keep bringing people in. And knowing where, in terms of Google Insights, people's search habits are in comparison to those can also be useful. The other question that I'm getting is, do you have recommendations on how to select institutions for benchmarking non-credit programs, especially in the online space? And I feel like in the non-credit space, and for those of you who work in the non-credit space, you probably agree, it's what the universities that are superstars in the traditional sense, in those Ivy League sense, are not necessarily going to be your superstars in the non-credit space. That's where I really feel like networking with people at UPSEA, the University Continuing Professional Education Association, they'll give you a better sense for who are the rock stars in non-credit. As you're benchmarking other non-credit schools, I would look more closely at, if I was a Tier 1 school, I'd be looking at other Tier 1 schools. I would look at similar markets. I think market similarity and rankings, kind of the strength of the brand, are pretty important when you're looking at non-credit benchmark universities.
I think in this case too, Nicole, I'd look at your geographical region, who's close to you. Even if you're, if whether you're an online space or you're on a campus space, students stay within about 100 miles of their own school, even in online. So I would be looking locally for what other people are doing as well, and benchmarking there.
Yeah. And one other question that we've got a little bit of time for is, how do you vet external partners? And Linda, that's probably a better question for you than for me.
Yeah, we go through a whole process of vetting the externals. Number one is we talk to other institutions a lot. And so we're fortunate in this business that we do a lot of consulting for other people. So we hear who people use, you know, what are their experiences like. We get a lot of case studies out of the vendor, and then we go track it all down and make sure it's true. So we talk to a lot of people in the business to make sure things are really happening. We also try to meet with the partner personally if we can, so we can get a feeling for really do they know what they're talking about in the market. And we've been fortunate that we have some consultants that work for us that are able to vet people for us at the level that we really need to. And that we've been really pretty good with. It doesn't mean we've always chosen great partners, but we've gotten this far in business, and now we have JMH as a partner as well, so that's always a really good thing. But so that's part of it. We also look at their financials if we can to find out what's going on. How big of a piece of the business is this part of their business? Are we going to be too small a partner for them to actually pay attention to us? And that is part of the problem when you're trying to sell at a partnership level. So those are some of the things that I would look at, but sometimes you just have to dive in because you have to get work done. And
Absolutely.
You may have to make choices that are, you know, make choices, the best of the best.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for your time today, and Linda, thank you so much for joining us for our JMH webinar. As I said, I will be emailing. Yay. I'll be emailing everybody a copy of the recording, and again, you can reach out to me or to Linda if you have any questions. And in the email that we'll be sending out, we'll let you know when our next JMH webinar is scheduled and what the topic is. So have a fantastic Wednesday, and thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.